So let's talk about Numerai, which is an incredible company, system, idea, I think. But good place to start. What is Numerai and how does it work?
So Numerai is the first hedge fund that gives away all of its data. So this is like probably the last thing a hedge fund would do, right? Why would we give away a data? It's like giving away your edge. But the reason we do it is because we're looking for people to model our data. And the way we do it is by obfuscating the data. So when you look at Numerai's data that you can download for free, it just looks like a million rows and of numbers between 0 and 1, and you have no idea what the columns mean. But you do know that if you're good at machine learning or have done regressions before, you know that I can still find patterns in this data, even though I don't know what the features mean.
And the data itself is time series data, and even though it's obfuscated, anonymized, what is the source data? Like approximately, what are we talking about?
So we are buying data from lots of different data vendors, and they would also never want us to share that data. So we have strict contracts with them. So we only can, but it's the kind of data you could never buy yourself unless you had maybe $1 million a year of budget to buy data. So what's happened with the hedge fund industry is you have a lot of talented people who used to be able to trade and still can trade, but now they have such a data disadvantage. It would never make sense for them to trade themselves. Mm-hmm. But Numerai, by giving away this obfuscated data, we can give them a really, really high quality data set that would otherwise be very expensive. And they can use whatever new machine learning technique they want to find patterns in that data that we can use in our hedge fund.
And so how much variety is there in the underlying data? We're talking about, I apologize if I'm using the wrong terms, but one is just like the stock price. The other, there's like options and all that kind of stuff, like what are they called? Order books or whatever. Like, is there maybe other totally unrelated directly to the stock market data, like natural language as well, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we were really focused on stock data that's specific to stocks. So things like you can have like every stock has like a PE ratio. For some stocks, it's not as meaningful, but every stock has that. Every stock has 1 year momentum, how much they went up in the last year. But those are very common factors. But we try to get lots and lots of those factors that we have for many, many years, like 15, 20 years history. And then the setup of the problem is commonly in quant called like cross-sectional global equity. You're not really trying to say, I believe this stock will go up. Mm-hmm. You're trying to say the like relative position of this stock in feature space makes it not a bad buy in a portfolio.
So it captures some period of time, and you're trying to find the patterns, the dynamics captured by the data of that period of time in order to make short-term predictions about what's going to happen.
Yeah, so our predictions are also not that short. We're not really caring about things like order books and tick data, not high frequency at all. We're actually holding things for quite a bit longer. So our prediction time horizon is about 1 month. We end up holding stocks for maybe like 3 or 4 months. So I kind of believe that's a little bit more like investing than kind of plumbing. Like to go long a stock that's mispriced on one exchange and shorter on another exchange, that's just arbitrage. Mm-hmm. But what we're trying to do is really know something more about the longer term future of the stock.
Yeah. So from the patterns, from these like periods of time series data, you're trying to understand something fundamental about the stock, not like about deep value, about like it's big in the context of the market, is like underpriced, overpriced, all that kind of stuff. So like this is about investing. It's not about, like, just like you said, high frequency trading, which I think is a fascinating open question from a machine learning perspective. But just to like sort of build on that, so you've anonymized the data, and now you're giving away the data, and then now anyone can try to build algorithms that make investing decisions on top of that data, or predictions on the top of that data.
Exactly.
And so that's what is it? So what does that look like? What's the goal of that? What are the underlying principles of that?
So the first thing is, we could obviously model that data in-house, right? We can make an XGBoost model on the data, and that would be quite good too. But what we're trying to do is by opening it up and letting anybody participate, we can do quite a lot better than if we modeled it ourselves.
Right.
And a lot better on the stock market doesn't need to be very much. Like, it really matters the difference between if you can make 10 and 12% in an equity market neutral hedge fund, because usually you're charging 2% fees. So if you can do 2% better, that's like all your fees, it's worth it. So we're trying to make sure that we always have the best possible model. As new machine learning libraries come out, new techniques come out, they get automatically synthesized. Like, if there's a great paper on supervised learning, someone on Numerai will figure out how to use it on Numerai's data.
And is there an ensemble of models going on, or is it more towards kind of like one or two or three like best performing models?
So the way we decide on how to weight all of the predictions together is by how much the users are staking on them.
Oh yeah.
How much of the cryptocurrency that they're putting behind their models. So they're saying, I believe in my model. You can trust me because I'm going to put skin in the game. And so we can take the stake-weighted predictions from all our users, add those together, average those together, and that's a much better model than any one model in the sum, because ensembling a lot of models together is kind of the key thing you need to do in investing.
Yeah, so there's a kind of duality from the user, from the perspective of a machine learning engineer, where it's both a competition, just a really interesting, difficult machine learning problem, and it's a way to invest algorithmically. So like but the way to invest algorithmically also is a way to put skin in the game that communicates to you that you're the quality of the algorithm, and also forces you to really be serious about the models that you build. So it's like everything just works nicely together. Like, I guess one way to say that is the interests are aligned.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's just like poker is not fun when it's like for very low stakes. The higher the stakes, the more the dynamics of the system starts playing out correctly. Like, as a small side note, is there something you can say about looking at the big broad view of machine learning today, or AI, what kind of algorithms seem to do good in these kinds of competitions at this time? Is there some universal thing you can say, like neural networks suck, recurrent neural networks suck, transformers suck, or they're awesome, like old school, sort of more basic kind of classifiers are better? Is there some kind of conclusion so far that you can say?
There's definitely something pretty nice about tree models, like XGBoost, and they just seem to work pretty nicely on this type of data. So out of the box, if you're trying to come 100th in the competition or in the tournament, maybe you would use that. But what's particularly interesting about the problem that not many people understand, if you're familiar with machine learning, this typically will surprise you when you model our data. So one of the things that you look at in finance is you don't want to be too exposed to any one risk. Like, even if the best sector in the world to invest in over the last 10 years was tech, does not mean you should put all of your money into tech.
Right.
So if you train a model, it would say, put all your money into tech. It's super good. But what you want to do is actually be very careful of how much of this exposure you have to certain features. So on Numerai, what a lot of people figure out is, actually, if you train a model on this kind of data, you want to somehow neutralize or minimize your exposure to certain features, which is unusual, because if you did train a stoplight or stop street detection on computer vision. Your favorite feature, let's say you have an autoencoder and it's figuring out, okay, it's got to be red and it's got to be white. That's the last thing you want to be. You want to reduce your exposure to. Why would you reduce your exposure to the thing that's helping your model the most? And that's actually this counterintuitive thing you have to do with machine learning on financial data.
So reducing your exposure would help you generalize the things that are. So basically, financial data has a large amount of patterns that appeared in the past, and also a large amount of patterns that have not appeared in the past. And so, like in that sense, you have to reduce the exposure to red lights, to the color red. That's interesting. But how much of this is art and how much of it is science from your perspective so far, in terms of as you start to climb from the 100th position to the 95th in the competition?
Yeah, well, if you make yourself super exposed to one or two features, you can have a lot of volatility when you're playing Numerai. You could maybe very rapidly rise to be high if you were getting lucky.
Yes.
And that's a bit like the stock market. Sure, take on massive risk exposure, put all your money into one stock, and you might make 100%. But it doesn't, in the long run, work out very well. And so the best users are trying to stay high for as long as possible, not necessarily try to be first for a little bit.
So for me, a developer, machine learning researcher, how do I, Lex Fridman, participate in this competition? And how do others, which I'm sure there'll be a lot of others interested in participating in this competition, let's see, there's like a million questions, but like first one is, how do I get started?
Well, you can go to numerai.ai, sign up, download the data. And the data is pretty small. In the data pack you download, there's like an example script, Python script, that just builds a XGBoost model very quickly from the data. So in a very short time, you can have an example model.
Is it a particular structure? Like what is this model then submitted somewhere? So it needs to be some kind of structure that communicates with some kind of API. Like how does the whole how does your model, once you create a little baby Frankenstein, how does it then live in the world?
We want you to keep your baby Frankenstein at home and take care of it. We don't want it.
Okay.
So you never upload your model to us. You always only giving us predictions. So we never see the code that wrote your model, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That our whole hedge fund is built from models where we've never ever seen the code. But it's important for the users because it's their IP. Why would they want to give it to us?
That's brilliant.
So they've got it themselves, but they can basically almost like license the predictions from that model to us.
License the prediction. Yeah.
So
think about it.
What some users do is they set up a compute server, and we call Numerai Compute. It's like a little AWS kind of image, and you can automate this process. So we can ping you. We can be like, we need more predictions now. And then you send it to us.
Okay, cool. So that's is that described somewhere, like what the preferred is, the AWS or whether another cloud platform? Is there sort of specific technical things you want to say that comes to mind that is a good path for getting started? So download the data, maybe play around, see if you can modify the basic the algorithm provided in the example, and then you set up a little server on AWS that then runs this model and takes pings and then makes predictions. And it's like, how does your own money actually come into play doing the stake of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so you don't have to stake. You can start without staking, and many users might try for months without staking anything at all to see if their model works on the real life data, right? And is not overfit. But then you can get Numerai many different ways. You can buy it on You can buy some on Coinbase. You can buy some on Uniswap. You can buy some on Binance.
So what did you say? This is how do you pronounce it? So this is the Numerai cryptocurrency.
Yeah, NMR.
NMR. You just say NMR?
It is technically called Numerai.
Numerai. I like it.
Yeah, but NMR is simple.
NMR Numerai. Okay, so and you could buy it, basically anywhere.
Yeah, so it's a bit strange because sometimes people are like, "Is this like pay to play?"
Right.
And it's like, it's like, you need to put some money down to show us you believe in your model. Right. But weirdly, we're not selling you you can't buy the cryptocurrency from us.
Right.
It's like, it's also, we never, if you do badly, we destroy your cryptocurrency. Okay, that's not good, right? You don't want it to be destroyed. But what's good about it is it's also not coming to us.
Right.
So it's not like we win when you lose or something like we're the house. Like we're definitely on the same team.
Yes.
You're helping us make a hedge fund that's never been done before.
Yeah. So again, interests are aligned. There's no tension there at all, which is really fascinating. You're giving away everything, and then the IP is owned by sort of the code. You never share the code. That's fascinating. So since I have you here, and you said 100th, I didn't ask out of how many, so we'll just. But if I then, once you get started and you find this interesting, how do you then win or do well? But also, how do you potentially try to win if this is something you want to take on seriously, from the machine learning perspective, not from a financial perspective?
Yeah, I think first of all, you want to talk to the community. People are pretty open. We give out really interesting scripts and ideas for things you might want to try. But you're also going to need a lot of compute probably. And so some of the best users are actually the very first time someone won on Numerai, I wrote them a personal email. It's like, you've won some money. We're so excited to give you $300. And then they said, I spend way more on the compute. So
this is fundamentally a machine learning problem first, I think. This is one of the exciting things. I don't know in how many ways we can approach this, but really this is less about kind of, no offense, but like finance-minded people. They're also, I'm sure, great people. But it feels like from the community that I've experienced, these are people who see finance is a fascinating problem space, source of data, but ultimately they're machine learning people or AI people, which is a very different kind of flavor of community. And I should say to that, I'd love to participate in this, and I will participate in this, and I'd love to hear from other people. If you're listening to this, if you're a machine learning person, you should participate in it and tell me, give me some hints how I can do well at this thing. Because this boomer, I'm not sure I still got it, but because some of it is, it's like Kaggle competitions. Like some of it is certainly set of ideas, like research ideas, like fundamental innovation. But I'm sure some of it is like deeply understanding, getting like an intuition about the data. And then like a lot of it will be like figuring out like what works, like tricks. I mean, you could argue most of deep learning research is just tricks on top of tricks, but there's some of it is just the art of getting to know how to work on a really difficult machine learning problem.
And I think what's important, the important difference with something like a Kaggle competition, where they'll set up this kind of toy problem, and then there will be an out of sample test, like, hey, you did well out of sample. And this is like, okay, cool. But what's cool with Numerai is the out of sample is the real life stock market. Mm-hmm. We don't even know. Like, we don't know the answer to the problem. We don't, like, you'll have to find out live. And so we've had users who've like submitted every week for like 4 years, because it's kind of we say it's the hardest data science problem on the planet, right? And it sounds like maybe a bit too much for like a marketing thing, but it's the hardest because it's the stock market. Yeah. It's like literally there are like billions of dollars at stake, and like no one's like letting it be inefficient on purpose. So if you can find something that works on Numerai, you really have something that is like working on the real stock market.
Yeah, because there's like humans involved in the stock market. I mean, it's you could argue there might be harder data sets, like maybe predicting the weather, all those kinds of things. But the fundamental statement here is, which I like. I was thinking, like, is this really the hardest data science problem? And you start thinking about that, but ultimately, it also boils down to a problem where the data is accessible. It's made accessible, made really easy and efficient at like submitting algorithms. So it's not just, it's not about the data being out there, like the weather. It's about making the data super accessible, building a community around it. Like this is what ImageNet did.
Exactly.
Like it's not just there's always images. The point is you aggregate them together, you give it a little title, there's a community, and that was one of the hardest, right, for a time, and most important data science problems in the world, because it was accessible, because it was made sort of like there was mechanisms by which, like standards and mechanisms by which to judge your performance, all those kinds of things. And Numerai is actually a step up from that. Is there something more you can say about why, from your perspective, it's the hardest problem in the world? I mean, you said it's connected to the market. So if you can find a pattern in the market, that's a really difficult thing to do because a lot of people are trying to do it.
Exactly. But there's also the biggest one is it's non-stationary time series. We've tried to regularize the data so you can find patterns by doing certain things to the features and the target. But ultimately, you're in a space where there's no guarantees that the out of sample distributions will conform to any of the training data. And every single era, which we call on the website, like every single era in the data, which is like sort of showing you the order of the time. It's even the training data has these same dislocations, and so yeah, and then there's so many things that you might want to try. There's unlimited possible number of models, right? Mm-hmm. And so by having it be open, we can at least search that space.
Zooming back out to the philosophical, you said that Numerai is very much like Wall Street bets. Is there? I think it'd be interesting to dig in why you think so. I think you're speaking to the distributed nature of the two, and the power of the people nature of the two. And so maybe can you speak to the similarities and the differences, and in which way is Numerai more powerful? In which way is Wall Street bets more powerful?
Yeah, this is why the Wall Street bet story is so interesting to me, because it's like feels like we're connected.
Yeah.
And looking at the forum of Wall Street bets, I was talking earlier about how can you make credible claims? You're anonymous. Okay, well maybe you can take a screenshot. Or maybe you can upvote someone. Maybe you can have karma on Reddit, and those kinds of things make this emerging thing possible. Mm-hmm. Numerai, it didn't work at all. When we started, it didn't work at all. Why? People made multiple accounts. They made really random models and hoped they would get lucky. And some of them did.
Yes.
Staking was our solution to could we make it so that we could know which model people believed in the most. And we could weight models that had high stake more and effectively coordinate this group of people to be like, well, actually, there's no incentive to creating bot accounts anymore. Mm-hmm. Either I stake my accounts, in which case I should believe in them because I could lose my stake, or I don't. And that's a very powerful thing, that having a negative incentive and a positive incentive can make things a lot better. And staking is this really nice key thing about blockchains. It's like something special you can do where they're not even trusting us with their stake in some ways. They're trusting the blockchain, right? Mm. So the incentives, like you say, it's about making these perfect incentives so that you can have coordination to solve one problem. And nowadays, I sleep easy because I have less money in my own hedge fund than our users are staking on their models.
That's powerful. in some sense, from a human psychology perspective, it's fascinating that the Wall Street bets worked at all, right? That the amidst that chaos, emerging behavior, like behavior that made sense, emerged. It would be fascinating to think if Numerai style staking could then be transferred to places like Reddit, and not necessarily for financial investments, but like I wish sometimes people would have to stake something in the comments they make on the internet.
Yeah.
Like that's the problem with anonymity, is like anonymity is freedom and power, that you can speak your mind, but it's too easy to just be shitty.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so you're making me realize from a profoundly philosophical aspect, Numerai staking is a really clean way to solve this problem. It's a really beautiful way. Of course, it only with Numerai currently works for a very particular problem, right? Not for human interaction on the internet, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, there's nothing to stop people. In fact, we've open sourced like the code we use for staking in a protocol we call Erasure. And if Reddit wanted to, they could even use that code to have enable staking on our Wall Street bets. And they're actually researching now. They've had some Ethereum grants on how could they have more crypto stuff in Ethereum, because wouldn't that be interesting? Like imagine you could, instead of seeing a screenshot, like, guys, I promise I will not sell my GameStop. We're just going to go huge. We're not going to sell at all. And here is a smart contract, which no one in the world, including me, can undo, that says I have staked millions against this claim.
That's powerful.
And then what could you do?
And of course, it doesn't have to be millions. It could be just a very small amount, but then just a huge number of users doing that kind of stake.
Exactly.
That could change the internet.
It would change and Wall Street. They would never have been able to. They would still be short squeezing one day after the next, every single hedge fund collapsing.